the year with our resident traditional healer, Gogo Dineo Implanti. Gogo, we've been talking about this off air. The fact that a lot more modern Africans, in inverted commas, are accepting the fact that we are people of this soil, and that we must embrace all things that come with being people of this soil, including answering the calling, including not being ashamed of the fact that you're either Sangoma or you're going to Twasa, for instance. Where would you say this awakening is from?
I think the awakening is that we are starting to challenge the stereotypes, and we're challenging some taboos around what it means being a Sangoma in the 21st century, because people still think and look at us as the Sangoma who was portrayed in the Shaka Zulu movie. And that's why the last time we spoke about creativity and said, but creativity needs to capture the truth of who we are.
All on generations.
Yes, and I think for me, you know,
where's your python?
Yeah.
Anyway,
and for me, it's like I get very disheartened when I see our own people who are supposed to tell our stories still misrepresenting. People don't invest a lot in, you know, African research and the telling of true African stories. So when people call on us, is like they want to call you, but to fit into their storyline, and you say, no, that's not how it rolls. This is not how initiation happens. But my other problem, Fresh, is that we as Africans, we don't appreciate the efforts that some of us are making in the progression of demystifying the myths, because we are so programmed to denounce, you know, seek perfection when it comes to black excellence. When we're doing this, people want it to be done perfectly. No, why the music, why that? Instead of celebrating that, you know, for the very first time in the history of this country, we have had a breakfast show that has a Sangoma. We've had shows where they've had psychics and mediums and all sorts of things.
Card reader,
and a palm reader.
An astrologist.
To do those things. So for the first time to have a resident traditional healer on a breakfast show, it's history made, and that's what we need to celebrate. And I always say to our black fellow people, but you know, why does our excellence has to be perfect? Look at Casper, for example.
Or Eurocentric.
But in order for us to come to the standards, it needs to be perfect. And whose standards are we trying to fit into? And mostly it's Western standards. And sometimes those shoes don't fit us because we don't wear the same kind of shoes.
We have a WhatsApp.
We've got a ton of WhatsApp, but this one I'm going to read out, coming from Anonymous, saying, "Good morning, family. I have been thinking of having a child by myself via in vitro fertilization. I'm black, Tswana, and I believe in ancestors, but my family has never done any rituals of any sort to acknowledge our ancestors. With that said, I'm kind of thinking of using a sperm of a white male donor just to eliminate or reduce rather any chances or changes of donors, ancestors wanting to know the child and all. So basically my question to Gogo is it better to have a white donor than a black donor in order to reduce the chances of dealing with the donor's ancestors, which I won't know because obviously I won't be allowed to know personal details of the donor?"
So I think it's an assumption and it's a stereotype, because what are ancestors? Ancestors are our loved ones who passed on, who are now one with divinity, you know, where they connected. So whether white or black, Indian, colored, we all have ancestors, and each race has its own rituals. Just because they don't, you know, I mean, it doesn't seem like what we do, because sometimes we've been projected as very rigorous and rigid when it comes to our rituals. So there are rituals one can perform, you know, when they want to have a baby on their own. And I think it would be good for her to consult and see, like, what do I need to put in place for this child, that this child can then become part of my own ancestral lineage, and then honor that one, and then let the child know before it gets created, this is what you are walking into. Because for me, people make African culture impossible and so ancient and primitive, but it always evolves. What happens in adoption cases, you know, where the child is biological parents but is adopted, there are rituals that are performed to adopt that child, to make sure the child is grounded in the roots of that family. So everything in African culture, there's a way. Our culture has always been innovative. You know, that's what happened when women couldn't have children. What happened when men were infertile? Those type of things. That's why there were systems that were put in place to make sure that we navigate around some of those complexities. So it's an assumption for her, and it might be even more, you know, detrimental for her to go the other way than what she thinks. But consult and find out.
We're going to take a call from Tumelo. Tumelo, thanks for holding. What's your question?
So what's up with Tumelo? Mm. But what rituals were you guys? What rituals were performed to align you? Because in our culture, there are rituals that are performed so that when you get into that, you and your husbands and sisters align. Were there any were any of those rituals performed? And then wa amukhelwa le wena handle. Oh, okay. So it might be a much more deeper issue that is also not necessarily about you, but it's manifesting through you because now you have become a daughter-in-law. But it could also be a relationship alignment issue. Once people start living together, some true personalities come, and we need to work with those dynamics. So I'm going to ask you not to conclude that it's something that is ancestral, but to look at both ends. And the first 2 years are the most difficult in a relationship. I speak from 9 years of marriage, so they are the most difficult because you need to be yourself and be one with somebody else. So look at multiple options and maybe seeking some relationship coaching.